gone and written a book full of facts, which is really irritating because they're therefore quite difficult to cross-examine, because the whole point of the guide is that it's trying to give you in an even-handed way a sort of a where we are, what's at stake, and who the parties are. You know, cross-examining that for an hour, I think, might be a bit sort of testing on all of us, because it just requires David looking up a page reference and saying, yes, that would be 22%. So what I propose is this, that David says a bit about the book, which is fantastic at that guide, that we then have some questions, and then we can take it wherever you want to go, because David's phenomenally well informed about the whole campaign, and I think he's the star journalist on Much Out of Scotland for the last 3 years. So, you know, we can fire questions at him, and I can be rude to him if we've run out of anything else to do. So just to recap before we dig in, David, do you want to hold your book up? So that's the book we're discussing, and it does provide a remarkably even-handed, very good guide, and actually I would strongly recommend it to anyone. I should also strongly recommend that he produces another issue at coming elections, because actually I think this kind of fundamental information is often missing for people. And my book, just while we're here, is this. And so maybe David has been fantastically diplomatic, having read it, about how he likes the font. So we might get on to discussing that too. So but first, 10 minutes for David to explain something about this very useful book.
Thanks, Alex, for that very effusive, flattering introduction. As I note in the preface to this book, one inevitable side effect of the referendum debate has been the publication of a plethora of books on almost every aspect of independence, for or against, its economic implications, its cultural implications, and even its spiritual dimension. This, we agreed, my co-author and I, is a good thing.
Sorry, David, can you just get the sound up a bit?
Sure, sorry. Is the microphone working?
Also the noise downstairs.
So you have to excuse the there's a Corey's tribute band going on downstairs.
I'll do my best. So Jamie Maxwell and I think this is a good thing. You know, people keep telling pollsters and so on that they don't have enough information. Both of us would beg to differ. There's probably, if anything, too much information from both sides. But with that in mind, the fact that people could feel overwhelmed by just how much is out there, we thought a gap in the market, in the publications market, was a short guide like this, which lays out as lucidly and as accurately as possible the sort of outline of the argument for and against, and then what both sides say on economics, on defence, on foreign policy, cultural stuff, and all of that. And the idea was not to make an argument either way, as other books have done, but to let voters make up their own minds, particularly undecided voters. I actually met a guy in the queue for a book festival event the other day who said he was an undecided voter and he'd read the book and it helped him make up his mind. So our work, to some modest degree, is done.
To which side to go?
I wasn't rude enough to ask. I was just actually, without sounding sanctimonious, I was just quite glad that it had helped him in one direction or another. And as I also note in the introduction to the book, referendums on Scotland's constitutional future are really no longer a novelty to Scots of a certain age. So on the 18th of September, anyone born after 1961, by my calculations, although somebody has questioned this, will be answering yes or no to a question about self-government for the first time. The first was obviously back in 1979, which asked voters if they wanted a devolved Scottish Assembly based in Edinburgh. You know, the circumstances of this are well known, although a majority voted yes. Not enough under the terms of the Scotland Act 1978, which stipulated that 40% of the electorate, rather than those voting, had to endorse the legislation. The second was in September 1997, one of the first times I voted, halfway through university, and that asked two questions. Should there be a Scottish Parliament, and if so, should it have tax-varying powers? And we all know the outcome of that. So in that context, the writer Neil Asherson views this referendum, this forthcoming referendum, as little more than the third putting of the same question: should Scotland govern itself? But of course, there's also a crucial difference. The first two referendums were about devolution within the UK. This referendum goes significantly further, asking about independence from the UK. And so, it's obviously a pretty big decision. I mean, I think everyone's agreed on that. There are some people I've met who just want the whole thing to go away. There are other people I've met who regard it as the most exciting and important moment in their lives. But I think everyone has agreed that it is an important decision. And to make important decisions, you need to have some affinity with the facts. So the book is sort of divided thematically. It doesn't have page numbers. My publisher assures me that there's some important point in thinking behind that. There are a number of sections. And in each case, we've just summarised the basic outline of the area, be it pensions or welfare, and then quoted from each side, what they say would happen if Scotland stays in the Union or leaves the Union. And then there's a bit of analysis, although it's fairly scrupulously balanced, as Alex has picked up. And it was actually quite an interesting exercise for Jamie and I, who, we have our views, and anyone who reads our stuff will know what our view is. And therefore, to sort of strip away what we think and put down as factually and as impartially as possible was an interesting exercise from our point of view. But I think we've pulled it off reasonably well. And as Alex says, it could even be if we extend this exercise into next year's general election, the Holyrood election of 2016, and perhaps another referendum on the European Union the year after that. It's a good format, I think, for giving interested voters, interested lay people, just enough information. So I think that's probably all I'm going to say about that.
Well, maybe I could. I'm sure lots of us have been to public meetings and will have heard this cry about who can we trust? Without having to come down on one side or the other, is there a wider issue there about citizens in a modern state just discovering the horrible truth that nobody knows anything, and you kind of have to take a bet one side and the other or not?
Yeah, it's interesting because, of course, you and I will remember several general elections in which big issues are discussed and debated, but there's never been a similar sense to me of the unreliability or untrustworthiness of that information. But in the context of a general election, or a devolved election, it does come down to trust. It's which side, which party do you trust to deliver on, most if not all of their policy pledges. And in that sense, the referendum is exactly the same thing. There is claim and counterclaim, but at the end of the day, you have to decide which side you trust more than another. Of course, if you trust neither side, then you're left in a fairly difficult position, and that could explain, the debating undecided voters there. They simply find it too difficult to come to a decision on that basis.
But to press this, isn't there, though, a truth that within dynamic, democratic, capitalist societies, you can never be sure how much anything is going to cost, where it's going to end up, what the consequences will be?
Yes.
Good.